This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Coffee-fueled stories. Coffee fitness unicorn. Coffee fitness unicorn. Hello. I'm Coffee Fitness Unicorn, and you're listening to Coffee Chats Podcast, a show where storytelling and coffee hang out. Today's episode is part 2 of the chat with Jessika Glover. In this episode, we talked about Book 2, Bunnies, Frogs, Dogs, and Bildungsroman. Thanks for listening. Go forth and be magical. Tell us about Book 2.
Okay. So obviously Book 1 ended on a cliffhanger.
I know. I was like, I was like, what the?
Like, wait,
no,
what?
You should have seen me. I was like, where's the rest of it?
Yeah.
What just happened here?
Yeah. The original Book 1 was a lot longer. Actually, when I first started querying, it was 172,000 words, which is too long. Like, rookie mistake. So then I shifted things. I pulled out a whole chapter. Actually, I pulled out 3 whole chapters because I have 2. I actually have 2 POV chapters from Kajiran's, from Kajiran's POV that I'm happy to send you. So, and it happens like kind of within the span of while Nisa is back over the veil.
And that was gonna be one of my questions about POV with your character. So now that we've got that in place, please continue, and then we'll come back to that.
Okay. Yeah. So it was a lot longer. And so what I did is I wanted a good like grabbing stopping point, and I figured that was probably the best. And so Book 2 picks up about a month afterwards, but it's like events directly after. They are searching for him. So she, Nisa and Silas and Cordian are searching for Kajiran, and they end up in Laranag, and there's battles, and the political tide has changed, and so there's a lot of like subterfuge within the provinces, and people are coming after them. And then Heilig, which is the land beyond the sea, is another continent, comes into play, and we find out that Nisa is a descendant of Heilig. And is it a spoiler? Well, I mean, you don't find out into the book, but this is where it ends up. And so the story goes back and forth between Efsing and Heilig and into London, and in and around London, I should say, back into England, in and around London. So, but it's a lot of action, and it's darker. It's a little bit of a darker twist than Another Beast's Skin was, and it's called A Braiding of Darkness. So, and right now we're scheduled for March 22nd release, so hopefully that sticks.
Very cool. And since we're talking about darker characters, Solange, is that how you say her?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, she's horrible. She's
oh
really
my
awful.
God.
Yeah, and you see more of her Book 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a banshee.
Wow. I was like, that's a and what's crazy, because she has such a beautiful name.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And a beautiful face. And
right?
She's an ugly person.
Oh, every time, like, I was like, I would get goose. I'm like, no,
yeah.
not
no. Yeah. In the 3rd book, I wrote a scene that scared the out of me, And I was sitting here and no one was in my house. I think everyone was staying over at friends' houses. My husband was working overnight, and my desk faces out, and it's dark at night because I just faced, like, there's a school. And so it's just a schoolyard and a hill and nothing. And I wrote this scene with her in it in the third book, and I scared myself. And I was like, ended up cuddling my dog, like, save me. She's horrible. So
yeah. So I was curious to know if you were gonna take us into her a little bit more, her backstory and things like that. So very cool. Yay. Yeah. And then the dogs, Bixby and Cuthbert.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes. And so were those dogs, like, are those dogs based off of any dogs that you've had? Like, did you have any dogs with the name Bixby and Cuthbert?
No, but so Cuthbert was the name of my husband's grandmother. His granny had a frog growing up named Cuthbert, and I adored both of them have passed on now, and I adored them. But she told me about Cuthbert the frog that she had when she was younger, and the story was so cute that the name stuck. And also there was a priest, I believe, at like I think it's a cathedral in Durham in England, which is around the area where Another Beast Skin takes place. It's that kind of coastal area. And he was kind of a sketchy dude. And so, but then it ended up, I know I'm butchering the story now in my research, but he kind of then ended up kind of turning coat for the better. And it seemed like a cool name for the dog. So the frog and the priest, frog and a priest walk into a dog. And Bixby, I had a bunny named Bixby when I was 12, and he was black and he had short ears and he was very sweet. And I'm pretty sure I named him after a boy that I had a crush on in junior high, but it was the cutest name for a bunny, and it just worked as the name for the dogs.
Totally. Oh my God, Bixby the bunny. That sounds adorable. I love who doesn't love bunnies? You have a black heart if you don't like bunnies. Like,
really.
Bunnies are just like soft and fuzzy and cute. So cool. So I know this is going to sound like a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Nope.
You describe the leathers and some of the gear that they're wearing in the book. Have you, and being LA and all, do you have any idea of like maybe like, I don't want to say like turning that into like a clothing line or something like that, but something, you know what I'm saying? Like, you were describing these things, and in my head I was like, oh, I would love to wear that.
Yeah.
Like,
that would be really cool. I haven't thought about it, but that would be really cool.
Like, because I think you described the boots and some of the leathers, and then obviously the blades. I know you can't have the blades, but some of the clothes. Like I said, I could see everything, and it wasn't. And I don't mean to use the comparison, but like in Game of Thrones, like part of the costuming is part of the story. I mean, like obviously that the various houses with their, the emblems, part of what colors they wear, exactly, the colors, and like the lion with the Lannisters, right? So like you just see that and you just know that that's House Lannister, right?
Absolutely.
And so as I'm reading your book, again, I'm not using that as a comparison. I'm using it as kind of like it grounds me in a story. And so I'm imagining your Fey places because you have the map. And so in my head, I was like, oh, do they have colors? What is their symbol? Like, what is their emblem? Like, you have Gryffindor, right? House Gryffindor, right? It's not to use that, but just as an example.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah. Where there's something that's more emblematic of the particular region or so. I mean, in my head, like there are different styles. Like, for instance, Maesara, it's a more temperate region. It's more like Mediterranean, and you're going to dress differently,
right?
And in the second book, that's kind of a whole thing where like Nisa ends up there, and she's like, I'm like dying. All she's in is like she has fighting leathers, and she's been on the road, and she's like, I need to buy clothes. It's like, and I mean, clothes are, for me, I want to know what characters are wearing, because it's really symbolic of where they are in their headspace. I mean, we have days where I'm not wearing anything but my baggiest sweatpants, and there are days where I'm like, no, I'm gonna put on lipstick, and or lip gloss, and I'm gonna wear my nice boots, and and so that's where we are in our headspace, and the characters, I think, would represent that kind of shift too. And then you want it to be culturally representative of where they are, who they are, whether they're showing respect to somebody or not. And so I kind of delved. I mean, and I really do like clothes. I don't like shopping. I kind of hate shopping, but I really like clothes. So, so it was fun to write all of those. That would be really cool to make a clothing line of another beast skin, though.
Like in my head, like I could see it. Like I could see it. You know what I'm saying? So like, and I love, buttons and pins, and like how cool I would love to have like that kind of stuff on my jacket or something like that. I would be like, yeah, I'm repping this house today.
Yes,
so,
definitely. Oh, that'd be so cool.
yeah. No, I was trying. I'm like, especially with the cover. I wanted to ask you about, like, because you do mention moonstones, and you do mention I think you mentioned the
double horn.
Yeah.
And so Nisa wears the double horn.
Yeah.
I did a giveaway a few months ago where I actually gave away a little double horn pendant, and then my husband got me one for Christmas last year that I don't have it on now, but it's really cool. It's like a long lariat with the double horn on it. So but yeah, I love pulling little details like that and making them a part of real life, bridging real life with my fantasy world.
Right? I mean, how cool would that be? And like the crystal that she was wearing, I believe it when she was taking the bath, and it kind of when it I don't want to say exploded, but like when it came off of the mount. Yeah. And so like in my head, I kind of like imagined, so you have the crystal, right? You have the crystal, and then I kind of like saw, like, I've seen it where it like floats. And so literally I could just imagine it just, coming popping free out from that. Yeah. Just popping out. Yeah. And so like, you get a crystal when you get a book, and right. Yeah. So like, how cool would that be? Yeah.
I actually love, there's a really cool shop in town here that I do like get my eyebrows done and stuff. And the back of the shop is the esthetician area, and then the front is a really cool shop. And they have actually got this like adaptogenic herbal kitchen book there from my friend Ashley, who works there. And then they do have jewelry, and they have crystals and candles and stuff like that. My phone just fell. But I thought, wow, it would be really cool to have my book in a store like that. Not a bookstore, but like a store, and then pair it with some crystals. Like, it would be such a simple little package for them to sell, and they can mark it up whatever they want, but it would be such a cool little package deal to give as a gift or to get for yourself. So
absolutely, because when I was trying, I had to look up blue agate, because you mentioned blue agate, and I didn't know what blue agate looked like. I know, obviously I know, amethyst, quartz, pink quartz, the more popular ones, but and then how you mentioned blue, is it blue lace agate or blue agate?
Lace agate? Yeah, I think the blue lace agate has like veins of white through it. Okay.
So it has it's more marbly. It has that lacy. So that makes sense. And then so because I had to go look it up, I do have a crystal book somewhere buried in all of our books, and I was like, I'm just going to Google it just to see what it was. And then, so you might have, one of the words that I have to work really hard at pronouncing correctly is chalcedony, because when you look at it, it looks like chalcedony.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time I want to go chalcedony, and it's not, it's chalcedony. And I'm like, why would you make such an awkward pronunciation of that word?
Yeah. Yeah. Really. Yeah, it is a ridiculous. In fact, I think I just glossed over it. And I'm like, yep, I'm good. Yep.
Totally. And so I was, like I said, I was, reading it, and I wanted to make sure I was looking at the right stone to make sure that I was associating it correctly. And I love how you would, again, with the limestone, I know what limestone looks like, and I didn't realize, the quartz in it. And then how cool would that be? I love what you said, that if you got this and you picked it up at this particular shop and it came with those stones and like moonstone. You also talk about one of the characters' eyes, Peridot.
Yeah,
and so I was like, Peridot. I was like, okay, what color is that? I know you can't sell this with Peridot, but I'm just, like,
would it be nice?
I know, right? And I was like, so again, I'm like, okay, what color is that again?
Yep.
But yeah,
it's such a pretty watery green. I just love it. And his eyes go from the peridot to the aquamarine, like Silas and Corrigan's. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, and you said like sea glass green, and I was like, oh, it's so pretty. Yeah, because I would write, like, if someone describes your eyes, wouldn't you want to have it described as like, a gemstone or something like that? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I have brown eyes, so everyone's like, they're brown. They're great.
Mm-hmm. No.
No one sings songs about brown eyes. Well, I guess technically they did. Ben Morrison did, but whatever.
I was like, that's the brown-eyed girl song.
like, wait a minute. Fine. I just negated my argument.
It's all good. Because I have green eyes. And so I get very, anytime, and my understanding is green eyes are only 1% of the population, the world's population. And so like, if you look at it globally, like, it pretty much only comes from a certain area. And so of course I'm fascinated with, so I'm a bit of an Anglophile. I love things, Irish, Scottish, British, Welsh. And my birthday is Beltane. I was born on May Day. So, nice. Right. So I'm kind of like, okay, so even though I'm not really Irish, I was born on Beltane. So in my head, I'm Irish.
That's all right.
I'm like,
hey, yeah,
that's why I got the Irish tattoo. I'm like, I'm going to get an Irish tattoo. I was born on Beltane, damn it.
There you go.
Right. I'm like, so there's this much of me, this little teeny tiny little nail. That's as much Irish as I am. But and so, because same thing, like, green eyes are only prevalent like in that Brittany and around the Mediterranean. Like, it's very prevalent, and that because it's a mutation of a mutation is my understanding. And so it had, like, again, I'm not a geneticist at all. I just break it down into its easiest components. It's a mutation of a mutation. That's all I know.
Okay.
But yeah, so when you were describing the green eyes, I was like, yes, tell me about those green eyes.
Yes, I know. And I love, my husband has hazel eyes, and then my kids, my daughter actually has these incredible green eyes. Like, they're like this, the color of moss, like olives, like fresh olives, And when she was little, we're like, I think she has hazel eyes, and we're like, no, they're like this bright, gorgeous, like olive green. And then my son has eyes that are, my mom says they're the color of blueberries, and I think they're like a denim blue. So they're like a nice dark blue. So pretty. I don't know. I mean, both of them got nice eyes. So hey.
That's awesome. The eyes sound beautiful. That's awesome. And that's one of the eyes is kind of the first thing I notice, and then obviously like a smile, right? So the eyes is kind of like that first, hey, what's that? And so when you were describing, like, with her olive eyes, like, I could really, 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 like, see, and like her skin tone and stuff like that. So you did a great job at creating, you were very vivid. And you really, like I said, you could really see she was three-dimensional. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm like, my words are, I'm like, I know what I'm trying to say, I just can't get there. She's very three-dimensional. You've made sure to I could see her muscles. Like, I could, you could see everything about her. So you very much felt like you were right there watching everything.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. That means a lot.
How long did it take you to write this?
Um, so I started it in the summer, in July of 2018, and then I think I finished the first full draft by March of 2019.
Wow.
So almost a year for that first draft, and then it went through a ton of beta readers and a ton of cuts and stuff, and then I started querying it in March of 2020 at 172,000 words, which was the kiss of death. And then I cut a lot and then requeried it in May. So it was, probably about a good 2 years to really kind of get it where it is. And then obviously, once it was given a publishing contract, then you go through like the various stages of edits. So
Very
that
cool.
took about a year. So
that seems like a pretty quick process. Like sometimes it takes people like years to write books.
Yeah.
But, like
I'm actually I'm a fast reader too, but I'm actually I guess I'm a fast writer in general. I'm going to say drafter, but I'm pretty fast with revisions and edits too. I kind of get in the zone and my focus is on that. And that's kind of all there is. But I have to get in that zone. Otherwise nothing happens. So
cool. Did you, like, when you were younger, did you ever think that you would write a book? Like, did you know you were going to write a book? Was there always a book in you?
Yeah, I started writing. I was always writing. Like, I would travel with my mom because she had different stations in Pan Am, so we would travel to different airports, and I would wait around for her, and I would write on anything. Like, Pan Am cocktail napkins were always available, so I was always writing on cocktail napkins. I remember writing on the back of a ticket. Like in those days, my mom would like go and write her own ticket at Pan Am, go behind the ticket counter, write it, and then we go and we take a flight. And that's the way it was done. It's a little different now, but I remember writing a poem or start to a story on the back of an airline ticket. And then at 12, I started my first novel called Eternally Yours about a vampire. And
do you still have that?
I do, actually. Yeah, it's actually quite funny.
Are you ever going to publish it?
I don't think so, but I think it's cute just to have. It was goofy, and I did it on my mom's like word processor, which was like half typewriter, half computer. And it was like.
That's so cool.
Fun. Yeah, but I've always been a writer, but I think I when I started university, I kind of lacked the confidence to carry it through. And I was like, I wanted to go into intelligence. I'm like, I'm going to go into the CIA, and this is going to be my job. And then towards the end of my university career, I was like, yeah, no, I'm really liberal. Like, this is not going to work out very well. So yeah, I scrapped that. I'm like, why don't I just write about it? Yeah. And then I took a long time. Like, I honestly, I kind of didn't do much of anything in the way of like building a career when I was raising my kids when they were really young. I kind of just went full on that and made chocolate, and it was okay. Things kind of fell into place, and I think everything happened when it should. So yeah.
Have you noticed how Coffee Fueled Stories doesn't have any ads? That's because I work tirelessly to keep this show alive. After 3 years on my own, I've decided I need to ask for your help. I've never asked anyone to subscribe. I've never asked anyone to leave a review. I've never asked anyone to rate the show. And I've never asked anyone to pay to listen. There are a few ways you can help support the show. I've created a Patreon page, Coffee Fueled Stories, and a subscription section on my podcast website. It's simple to support and help me keep my dream alive. Just click the link in the show notes to set up your paid subscription option. It's that easy. Thank you for your support. Cool. Did your father tell you fairy stories? Like, is that how did you get into fairies per se and the realm of like the fae? Like what
I think
brought
it was
you to
just
them?
me. I don't know, my my mom's always been a reader, but she was never into fantasy. She's actually never read a fantasy book apart from like The Mists of Avalon, which was popular in the 80s, I think. She never read a fantasy book until mine. And she's like, I've been missing out on this whole genre. She's like, I think it's one of my new favorites. So that was kind of cool.
How cool
But she
is
wasn't
that?
into it. And I was always into vampires. And she's like, I don't get it. Like, why do you like vampires? Like, I like so weird. She's like, kind of a freak. I mean, she never said that, but like, you know, it's like it was a different kid, you know?
Oh my God. That's
And so it just kind of, it went from there. And a lot of fantasy is written by, you know, old white men.
Mhm.
And I didn't necessarily identify with that. And I identified more with the old stories of the Fae and the old stories of like, you know, paganism and the occult. And I thought, I want to make my own new version. And now, you know, new fantasy out there is taking a lot of that into concern now. And it's definitely more, I think, female driven now, the industry. So it's not that I created this new thing, but I definitely happened upon it, I think at the right time. But it was just an interest in like the old stories. And I've always been kind of into like the, you know, different pagan religions and mythology and really into mythology. And
That's so cool. So then help me understand this, because they never explained it when I was in Ireland. There were fairy mounds everywhere. There were these mounds, right?
Uh-huh.
And you would just be driving along. So for example, from Dublin to Newgrange, I went to Newgrange, and that's why I have this guy. And so it was like an hour and a half drive. And the driver was not our tour guide, right? So there was actually someone who was talking and telling us about the things on the countryside and giving us backstories and things like that. And he told us, he said, every time you see a mound out there, it's a fairy mound. And whatever you do, be very respectful, because you don't want to piss off the fairies.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to piss off the fairies. Yeah.
Right? And so at Newgrange, you can literally walk all the way around the whole monument itself, which is freaking cool. Like I said, I waited how many years? I had waited, I think, 28 years. I got there I had graduated undergrad, so I was 38. So I had been wanting to go since I was a child, like Newgrange. And so when we're getting there, like I said, he just kept talking about these fairy mounds and don't piss off the fairies. And so I'm sitting there just on the grounds, because you can just take it in. And I'm sitting there, and there was this little fairy mound like right next to me. And I was like, I'm here. I'm not being disrespectful. Please don't hate me, because I'm a tourist right now. I was like talking to this mound, and I was like, I'm cool. Like, it's okay.
Be cool, honey bunny.
Right. And so I was like, is anybody else talking to the fairy mounds? Obviously I wasn't saying it out loud, you know, but in my head, I was like talking to the fairy mound. Like, did you talk to the fairy mounds?
No, but I am really respectful in places that seem like there's some sort of sacred nature to what's going on. It's disappointing because it went to Stonehenge a couple of years ago, and there are like the fairy mounds, which they called like burial mound. They are old burial mounds from wherever, and it's such a tourist. And I get it. I get that that I think the National Trust has come in and like made that what it is, and that there's that double-edged sword of taking care of it, because it's history. It's global history. It's not just like British history. This is part of who we are, but at the same time it's so commercialized, and there's just hordes and tons of buses of people going in and walking around these sacred places, and it's kind of a bummer. And I always kind of get chills thinking, we're walking through a souvenir shop at what was someone's altar, and that seems strange.
Yeah, I try to make a point wherever I go. So even in Thailand and Cambodia, right? Same thing, that like with a reverence, right? Every monument I've been to, I go with a sense of reverence. So I went to Borobudur in Indonesia, and most of the Buddha heads were cut off and removed because people were buying them, right? So there weren't many Buddha heads left in the monument. And so there's a picture of me where I'm literally stretching to touch the Buddha, to give reverence, like, and he was kind of like off in this corner, and, I was like, same thing, offering respect. And so that's why I was talking to the fairy mount, I'm going to sit there. I'm like, please, you, and I guess that's the difference between being a tourist and a traveler, right? You do have that sense of respect. You do have that sense of reverence, and honor, honor. And I don't know, maybe, I don't know if it's just because, I don't know, like, would you say you were brought up that way, or is that,
I think so. My mom was always, my mom's a traveler, and not just because, she had wings from her job,
right?
But we grew up, and she would always take us to all the different cultural fairs. Like, we would go to the Russian Orthodox festivals, and we would go to Orthodox Jewish festivals, and we would go to the Thai festivals, and we were in Miami, so there was like Gumbe, the Bahamian festival, and like any cultural festival my mom took us to, and we would eat the food, we would get the crafts, and that's how we grew up, from my brother and I. And we're citizens of the world. And so that means being respectful, no matter where you are, wherever you're traveling, who you're with, you're a citizen of the people. And, we all need to kind of band together on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that, like, Ireland, I don't know, there was just something like standing at the Hill of Tor and having that big lodestone, like, right there. And, because you want to touch it, right? You want to touch these things. And literally we were told, don't touch it. And so we were like, okay, I'm not going to touch it. And I was like, can I just like take a picture though, to make it look like I'm touching it? Like, you know what I mean? I wanted to like make it look like I was, because I knew I couldn't touch it. And he was kind of like, yeah, that's okay. Okay. I'm like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but like, it's magical, it's powerful, it's history, because it was the coronation stone. So they used to have the crown when they would do the crowning ceremony. They would put the crown on the stone, and I was like, I know I can't touch it, I'm gonna respect it and I'm gonna honor it, but at the same time, this thing is really freaking cool, man.
It's really cool.
Yes.
Like the dynasties that has seen. That's so cool.
Like, because especially with the Irish folk tales, like, I'm fascinated with the Irish folk tales, and like the Battle of Ulster, and Cuchulainn, that's the pronouncing of his name, because I always wanted to call it Cuchulainn or something like that, but Cuchulainn. But it looks like
the Welsh names are really hard too. We're like,
yeah, they have like 5 L's in a row. What's up with that?
I don't even try. I just, if I see a Welsh word or a name, I'm like, I'm gonna look up how to say that, because I know I'm gonna just kill it. It's gonna die. It's awful.
Right. So have you read the Mabinogion? I think that's the pronunciation for the Welsh. The Mabinogion, and my professor is gonna kill me for slaughtering that one. But she recommended that one as a Welsh, like, folk tailing, and
nice.
there's a story about a little mouse in there, and she was telling me about that. She was like, you wait till you get to the story of the mouse, and I was like, okay, so the Mabinogion, but it does not look like that at all.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So funny.
That's why I wanted you to pronounce the names for me, because
you never know.
You never know. So do you have a favorite fantasy author, or I know you had mentioned Lord of the Rings, but is that like
Lord of the Rings to me is kind of like a standard. And I appreciate it on its level, on its pedestal. Like we went to the Tolkien exhibit at the Bodleian Library at Oxford a couple years ago, and he's so brilliant. It was amazing. Couldn't take any pictures inside, but there's like an interactive map of Middle Earth and like his letters to his kids and like his backstory. And he was really brilliant. And so that's always kind of like the wallpaper, I feel like, of fantasy. You can't do anything or get around anything without having this reverence for Tolkien. And I'm a huge fan of Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, and that's my favorite book. And it's the All Souls series, and I read it in 2011 when it came out, and I've been like her biggest fan since. And so I think, and that's kind of what I guess we say low fantasy, because it takes place here and it's magic and it's, you know, witches and vampires and demons and stuff like that. But it's definitely fantasy. So that's my favorite. And I like a bit of a puzzle. I like my mind to be challenged when I read. And then I love the Sarah J. Maas books, like Court of Thorns and Roses and that series. They're so much fun, honestly. Like they're like goofy and sexy and violent, and that's fun. And you know, I have a whole, like, I don't know if you can even see back on my shelf.
I see that gorgeous skull back there.
My skull,
that's awesome.
And then my sword that I made, because I don't know if you saw that on my Instagram, but I made a dress out of 300 pages of my manuscript. So like a corset and a whole gown and like a ruff and then a sword out of the manuscript pages. And so my sword's back there. The dress is over there and I don't know what to do with it. It's just sitting there.
That's creepy ghost. Cool. That is so cool. So you said March
22nd. So if all goes as planned. So
3/22/22.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, looking for it.
That's so cool. Did we nerd out?
I think we hit everything. I mean,
yeah.
You know, it's we talked about, you know, the skin and needing to shed another skin, and it's a story of growth. You know, it's someone's personal growth, and that's I think that's the whole, like, the basic plot of the book is it's a story of growth. And yeah. I think did you have a question about POV?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, so I noticed that you have a couple of chapters where we are in the other characters, not just in the main character. So you said that you were going to, in book 2, there's more POV of the other characters.
Definitely. Yeah, we definitely we have in the second and third books, it's all POV. So book 2 is still mainly Nisa, and but there's also there's Kadiran, there's Raynar, definitely Silas and Cordian. I think that's it, book 2. And then third book, there's a few characters that we haven't met yet. So yeah, and I find it fun to do that because like when I get into Silas is really fun to write. And getting into their heads is just it really gives another level to the story, I think.
Yes.
Actually, Corrigan's really fun to write too, because she's so different to me that I love writing her, and I'm like, I wish I could be like Corrigan when I grow up. She's so cool.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, she is so cool. Like, I just want to hang out at the pub with her and just like listen to her talk. Yeah, that's so cool.
We could totally hang out. She's just so confident, and I'm like, I want to be like you.
Right. And you said, so we're also going to be in Reynard. Is he that's interesting because so and I work really hard at making sure not to be presumptuous when I'm reading, but I do get excited anytime somebody I'm going to use the word foreshadows. So Reynard means fox.
It does.
And so anytime there's Reynard or a fox, because as we can nerd out cognates, there are many different cognates of Reynard and or fox that literature people love to do because they like to plant that little seed. And so when you introduced Reynard, I was like, uh-oh, we have a fox in the hen house. But I was like, I don't want to be presumptuous. I was like, is Reynard going to be, is he going to be a jerk? Is he going to be like who? I was like, oh no. And so did you intentionally give him the name Reynard?
I did.
To mess with us?
Yeah. And honestly, you're the only person who's pulled that out yet. Any interview I've had, no one has picked up on that. And there's even like the French children's like a cartoon character, a little fox named Reynard. Yeah, and no one else has picked up on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Shakespeare class.
There you go.
Thank you, because Tybalt, I believe that's his cognate, is from the French. And then there was another story. Is it Isolde? Tristan and Isolde.
Tristan and Isolde. Yeah. That's one of my favorite tales. I love that story.
Right? Isn't that so beautiful, heartbreaking, and beautiful?
It is.
Oh my God! Yes. Yeah. We won't go down that path. But yeah, and so like I said, I was really hoping that Reynard wasn't going to be the fox in the hen house. And so again, without spoilers, but that's really cool that book 2 will take us into Reynard.
Yeah. And he's such a complicated character, and which is why I like him so much, because I mean, I'm always one who roots for the underdog, and I obviously knew his backstory when I wrote him. I worked character sheets, so I knew what he'd been through. I knew who his sister was, and I knew the way he works, so I don't want to spoil it, but like but he definitely is. I mean, he's a fox and he's a weasel, and that doesn't mean he's bad. It means he knows how to work the room.
Yes. And it's, I love that you said that, because so we lived in Colorado and we had a family of foxes that were next to us. And so we had little kits. And so we got to see them grow up, and they were right outside our bedroom window. And we also had a farm. Our neighbors had a farm, and we had a family of foxes. And I was like, and they didn't have, the chickens were like, they were just out. They had ducks, geese, and chickens. And I was like, don't you dare be shooting what's on my property, because you don't keep your animals contained. Yeah. It's like, to them, it's a food source, and they're going to figure out how to help themselves to what you got. And so when we had we were so nervous about the family of foxes, because they were adorable. I loved watching them, and they would, pounce on we were like, eat all the field mice you want. They're all yours. Have at it. And we would watch them play and pounce, and it was just fascinating. And I never viewed them as anything threatening, because again, I know that they're crafty, and it's about survival for them. It's about survival. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep. So when you had Brain, I was like, all right, where are we going? Where is she taking us?
Yep. He's my weasel.
Yep. But again, it's not a negative thing. It's it's about survival.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very and that's cool. Why, I mean, you can see his whole, he has a huge character arc and personality arc. Not personality, he is who he is, but he definitely has his character arc, and you see it more and more through books 2 and 3. So
awesome. Oh, that's exciting. That's cool. And I love that you mentioned that, and I always say Nasa, so I'm sorry I slaughter her name.
Okay. No, a lot of people pronounce it as Nasa as well, and some people have actually, I've seen it spelled with an A. I just go with the old pronunciation of Nasa, so it doesn't offend me.
Thank you. And because one of my favorite words is Bildungsroman. As a literature major, that's one of the first words you learn. And one of the things that I love about your book is that because most of the time Bildungsroman is usually a young boy, right, going through his changing and figuring out his path. But I believe that anybody, regardless, male, female, and age, whatever age, we are constantly having and experiencing Bildungsroman.
Absolutely. Yep.
And she was same thing. How old is she again?
35.
35. Yeah. So, we experienced, such grief, right? And such like loss. And we didn't experience it like very, very young. We experienced it older. And so it's like you said, and writing is very cathartic, extremely cathartic. And so having that experience, and so she's, 35, and like you were saying about being in your 40s, right? Like you own it now. Like there's just things you just own. And so we are constantly having our own Bildungsroman,
Yeah.
So I thought that was very powerful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because, I've had a few reviews saying she reads as younger. Like, I don't understand how she's supposed to be 35. And I'm like, why? Because she's not like driving a minivan, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
we're all kind of different. Like, I don't run around going, and today I'm just going to go to the PTA meeting and then I'm going to do my taxes. Like, no, I'm going to research sword fights and I'm going to throw a kettlebell around. I'm going to play with my dog and I'm going to like, talk smack with my kids. Like, it doesn't, we all have a different view of where we are and what we're doing. And to have to like subscribe someone to our version of who we think they should be, like, why don't be that reader? Don't, appreciate, that, we're so different and grief looks different on everybody too. How we're going to process that, it's so different. I experienced a really huge loss earlier in this year. I think we talked about that. My cousin passed away, and the way I processed the grief of that isn't how I would have expected myself to do it. And so we don't necessarily always know it ourselves until we've gone through something. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that I decided to do the podcast so late. Like I waited so long. I waited to retire to have all of these things because I was afraid. So the first time I did a blog, I was still working, but I was terrified to put myself out there. Terrified. As a writer, right? We're very vulnerable. These are our babies. I mean, Faulkner was the one, I believe, who said, kill your darlings, right? Yeah. And you don't want to do that. You don't want someone else to do that. Like, and Hemingway said, writing, there's nothing to it. You just bleed on the page.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We put our feelings out there, and
Absolutely.
Everybody loves to be a critic, and it hurts. Yeah. Right. And the slightest thing, and you're like, look, I'm putting myself out there. And I never really understood that until I started putting myself out there. Literature feels good. Like there are no wrong answers. That's the beauty of reading a book. So like when you left this cliffhanger, I was like, well, I guess I just have to see where she takes me now.
Yep. You're at my mercy.
Right. Right. And if I could break it down and be like, well, that's crap. That's the worst way to end a book. Why would you do that? No.
That's what my husband said too. He's like, oh, why'd you do that? People don't like that. I was like, people like that.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, well, the story's not done. The story's not done. Yeah. We've just been introduced to this world, and now we have characters that are growing and sharing and experiencing. And now we have to find out what's next. Where do we go from here? Yeah. So yeah, but I did. I was like, when I looked at it and I was like, no, she didn't.
I'm sorry.
She did. She left me hanging.
It's true.
That's okay. It'll be good to talk about
POV chapters.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you very, very, very much for today. I really enjoyed nerding out with you and talking about all of this fun stuff. Yes, this is very cool. Very cool. And before we go, can I please have you say the tagline, go forth and be magical, however you would like to say it?
I feel like I really want a magic wand, but I'm going to hold a crystal and say, go forth and be magical.